Awesome.
Hello and welcome to the Low Carb Conversations podcast. I am your host, Holly Jean. I am joined today with my co-host, Leah. Hi, Leah.
Hi, Holly. Hi, everyone.
And we have a special guest today. We have Michael McNeal. He is a certified holistic health coach and also a cell core practitioner. And he is here to talk with us today about all things parasites and detox. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Leah. I'm glad to be here. You guys are so dope, and parasites is my favorite subject. So,
oh my gosh, it's starting to be my favorite subject, even though it is a terrifying subject.
it's true.
I just saw some. Oh, just don't Google parasites coming out of people under like the images tab. Just don't do that. That's my advice to all of our listeners. I am so curious to hear more about your story, like how, because I know you're also a musician, you got like a music thing going on, you've got a bunch going on. So how did your life go from music man to I am like the detox guy and all things parasites?
I love that. Yeah. So I'll give you just a brief, kind of my testimony in short, if you will. So when I was 12, I had a traumatic brain injury to the back lower right side of my head. I was practicing fake kick in the theater class, and I pushed myself off the floor and landed on a metal podium corner. It went right into the back of my head, and then I smacked the linoleum floor, and I nearly went into a coma instantly. So that rotational injury caused bone spurs to grow off my occipital bone, C1, C2, and C3, so big that I was pushing against my brainstem. So it was extremely painful growing up with that. A year later, I was in a drive-by. So a man pulled up in a white truck and shot at me 3 times as a prank, fired all around me, but I had a vagal response. I had a I'm gonna die response. So like I peed myself, I dropped my guitar, I thought I took my last breath.
Gosh.
I was gonna give myself to God. Trauma, that was like, okay, so I have brain injury, I have post-concussive syndromes called PCS. I have severe trauma. Y'all know I'm, because y'all are extremely intelligent, but head injuries cause leaky gut. So I went from like normal growing kid to a leaky gut kid that started to develop blood sugar issues from my Southern family. Thank you, Southern family. We're just basically
all that sweet tea.
Oh my God. Chicken Express, I would get a half gallon of sweet tea and drink it every day. I was mainly a animal protein, carbs, sugar. I was addicted to Starbucks. I was a caffeine addict. It was just savage, the amount of garbage I was putting in my body. And I wound up eating myself into type 2 diabetes. So by 15, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And what happened to me is on the left side of my body, I started to develop little ticks, just some, kind of minute, didn't really bother me. By age 16, it was full blown Tourette's. I couldn't control like motor movement. They diagnosed me with Tourette's. And I was like at a crossroads of life because I didn't want to go to school because kids made fun of me. And I also wanted to be healed, and I didn't know how to get there. So my mom was like taking me to chiropractors. They weren't really doing much, and psychologists to have me talk out trauma, and all these different routes weren't equating to me like fully overcoming, healing. And YouTube just came out. Thank God for YouTube and, the equivalent of, podcasts now, and all the ways that people can consume information that could be the ticket for them to be healed. It could come straight from our voice into their ears, that they reach out to someone like you, Leah, or me, or, you, Holly, and they can get the roadmap for them to be healed. Well, I happened to find one of those people. His name was David Wolf. I don't know if I've ever heard of David Wolf. Mm-hmm. He was a health educator, like pioneer. He's like a Dr. Mercola. He's like one of the OGs, and he had a YouTube video on reishi mushroom and being a vegan, healing your blood sugar. So I told my mom, I was like, I'm going to go vegan and I'm going to order this reishi mushroom stuff. And she's like, oh Lord, okay, whatever you think, And so I took reishi mushroom. I went vegan. A year later, my blood sugar issues were completely gone, but I still had tics. The only time I didn't tick was when I was playing music, because I had that left-right hemispherical brain connection that's super common in the Tourette's world. that when they get musical, their brain is in cohesion and the dopamine and serotonin pathways regulate. So there's no misfirings in your nervous system. It's fascinating. Well, God had a little journey for me of health, at the same time. Another practitioner I found, his name was Peter Gillet. He was a chiropractic neurologist. So he did functional neurology and chiropractic work. So he was a Carrick student. If y'all know Carrick's work, they do a lot of eye movement things. And when I walked into his office, he was checking reflexes, and he checks reflexes all over your body. And when he was checking them, he was like, "Oh, I see what's going on with you." And I'm like ticking in front of him and like, gyrating around. And he's like, "Don't worry, don't worry." He's like, "I got you covered." At the same time, I saw a functional medicine doctor who took a completely different route: IV therapies, live blood microscopy, standard, functional medicine tests, blood tests. And he was doing IVs like diflucan and ozone and Myers cocktail and vitamin C. So I ran like an extreme healing track where I saw a functional medicine doctor and a funk neuro chiropractor. And in 4 years, I was healed of type 2 diabetes and Tourette syndrome. So
That's amazing.
inside that 4 years, I studied more with experiential knowledge and experimentation on myself, which is knowledge that you consume and apply yourself becomes so much more realistic to apply to others than just regurgitated information you learn in school.
Absolutely.
So I studied, I'm not even kidding you, between playing music and studying, it was probably, split about 5 hours a day of both. I was so into it. Podcasts, YouTube videos, I grabbed all kinds of books. I was just fascinated at all of these biochemical pathways and all these cleanses and adaptogens, and all this stuff was like the amalgamating soup that just got me healed. And I was like, how do I give that back to people? How do I nourish people? How do I empower practitioners or patients and so long testimony short, as short as I can make it. I delved in to become a certified holistic health coach myself. I did the Institute of Integrative Nutrition's program, which was extremely boring for me. I could have done it in my sleep. It was like very basic, very, very basic. But the paper equated to a business validity so that people could trust me. So it was necessary, And so I get that. I meet a biological dentist. I do health coaching for her whole family. I'm kind of like skipping a bunch of stuff. She tells me that if I don't become a coach and help as many people as possible, I'm basically going to miss my calling from God. So I ran my own coaching practice in Dallas for 3 years. I met reps for supplement companies like Zymogen and Orthomolecular and Standard Process, Biotics, and you name it on the gambit of, and I just loved what they did. So I've worked for testing companies, laboratories. I was in laboratory sales. I was in a lot of sales positions. And I found myself right when the pandemic started, an old doctor that I used to work with told me that Cellcore had an opening. So for the last year, I worked for Cellcore in Texas. And I got so close from an education standpoint of all of the founders and the scientists, because I get to I go ham on the nerd level of stuff, And so I was just fascinated because a lot of scientific principles that I'm going to talk about on this podcast, I actually learned from Cellcore's education tracks. And it changed the way that I would treat or do coaching for clients. And it also just changed my scientific brain of the perception of how functional medicine is ran and how they function. There's a lot of pitfalls in that arena, and there's a lot of people shooting in the dark. And I kind of want to be a light to educate and, get out there and myth bust all the things and hopefully empower people who are listening to make healthier decisions and more intelligent decisions when it comes to their healing or someone else that they're taking care of.
I love this. I love asking people what their journeys are because I never would have thought that that's where we were going to go with this, from brain trauma to drive-by shootings to look at me, I'm changing the world. It's fascinating. And I think there's so much truth in what you say about how we can learn so much from our own journeys, and then
Yeah.
to be able to turn around and apply that to other people's lives.
Mm.
I know there's a lot of practitioners who are excellent coaches, practitioners who maybe do not have a bunch of initials behind their name,
Mm.
but I know so many people who have a certificate in health coaching that are smarter than most doctors I've ever met when it
I'm
comes to
right there
how
with
the
you.
body works. And it's like there's
Yeah.
something about walking that path yourself
Mhm.
where it's like tenfold in education. So thank you for sharing that with me. And I love David Wolf. Like, I love him. I'm kind of like a little bit of a fangirl.
Oh, wow.
Well, I met him at the Truth About Cancer event in Anaheim like a couple years ago, and he's just the nicest guy. Like
Mm.
it just hanging out in the lobby with people. Like, it is my dream. I'm gonna put this out into the universe for probably the umpteenth time, but I will visit his ranch in Hawaii. And like
Mm.
that's just
Oh, be
all
so cool.
naturally growing everywhere. And we're just gonna
Yeah.
sit around and eat avocados and talk about
Let's go.
detoxification.
Yes, I love that. That would be awesome.
That's my goal in life. Okay, well, I want to dive right in because we have a lot I want to cover today. Our first article, Leah is going to take, I'm going to fill in where she can. Sorry for our listeners, Leah has a sore throat.
Got a scratchy voice.
Yeah. It's her morning voice. But this first one, we're just going to talk about what are some of the common parasites in humans. And I'm going to let you take it away, Michael. Well, I'm going to give it to Leah, but I know that you're going to be able to run with this, and let's talk about all the freaky things.
Cool.
Thanks, Holly. Well, I guess we want to have a bit of a starting point. So let's talk about parasites, maybe some of the common ones that you see and how sometimes like they manifest in people, because like, being a mum, I see, my kids, they might like have a disturbed sleep, bit of an itchy bottom. Then you're like, oh, quick, got to worm them. So, it's a little bit more to it than that. So give us the details of what you're seeing.
Yeah. So my parasite introduction into that reality was my dad was a missionary, and he has been all over the world. And if you have anything to do with overseas travel, then you are educated on the dangers of parasites. It's just part of their education. And so the common misunderstanding, though, is that if you're in the States, or if you're just kind of an everyday average, you go, eat at a restaurant, you come home, you do your thing, that you can't really contract parasites. But it is such a myth out there that we're going to bust here. Parasites are hosting organisms that have to find a host to feed off of their nutrition and to feed off of their body in order for them to thrive and survive. And I think probably the most common one that we can think of collectively is a tapeworm, a big old worm that sits in your gut that eats your nutrition and eats what you eat. But the reality is that it eats what you eat, but it also takes and has waste in your body. The waste that it produces is an ammonia-based toxin that gets spilled out into your blood and manifests such severe immune issues that it's not commonly talked about. Typically, we stick to digestion, but parasites can find their way into your blood. They can find their way into your liver. They can find your way into your lungs, in your sinus cavities, and there are a lot more common of ways that you can pick them up, which I will break them down for you, than we could ever suspect. And it's like you said, Leah, it's beyond just pinworms that your kids get and have an itchy bum, and you've got to, take them through ivermectin or different, protocols in order to deworm them. It's something that we typically as adults are living with chronically, and we're actually never getting rid of them unless we get to hear something like this or find a way to cleanse and detoxify them out of our body and get our digestion and immune system reset.
Yeah, that it's a wormy topic. No,
it's true. It's definitely a wormy topic.
So they're living all around us, and usually when I like to think of it, I like to think of like when the conditions and the environments are right in the stomach, that's when they tend, or in the digestive system, that's when they tend to come up and manifest and overgrow. And then you usually take something to wipe them out, which you think is going to wipe them out, but you continue to eat those particular foods and all those kinds of things. And then a little way down the track, you're like, oh, they've come back again. Do you want to talk us through kind of like what's happening here?
Yeah. So typically, if you believe in this is like a whole science. It's terrain theory, that our bodies should have such a strong foundational terrain of healthy bacteria, flora, and in a pH that's balanced enough and acidic enough that these parasites can't actually attach in the digestive system. And so that we should have an internal terrain that's actually harsh to their systems, so that we're not actually attaching them when we go out into the environment. We should be able to walk on the barefoot normally. We should be able to eat sushi. We should be able to consume things where our body can actually handle them. But there's a long process to get there of first, cleansing your terrain out and then putting and shifting in these nutrients and these ingredients where they don't have the ability to stick anymore. And so a lot of times we're doing the nutrient part, but we've never done the cleanse. And so we're just throwing, I tell people, you're throwing very expensive supplements into your dirty body, and guess who eats them? Parasites do. You're keeping them healthy. You're keeping them strong. And you need to get kind of a backwards approach where the way it should be is to actually cleanse them out of the body. And that way nutrition can stick, your terrain can shift. And that way your internal environment is not so affected by the external. And that way that stressor becomes less affecting you. And so we'll get into, like, there's a lot of different, tools out there in our tool belt that we can utilize in order to go along that journey, that even beyond supplementation, that I think, is going to be fun to talk about.
And definitely Holly's going to go into that a little bit deeper. I might come back just a little bit. So we were talking about some of the symptoms that people might experience. So we talked about like kind of affecting the immune system and digestive system, but fatigue's a big one that people can experience. It can impact blood sugar regulation. You can have brain fog. What are some of the common ones? Teeth grinding. That's another one that, usually you get your kids are grinding their teeth in their sleep. What are some other ones that you notice with your clients?
Yeah, I think probably the number one that I never really thought about that was so prevalent is brain fog. You have to imagine that your gut is your second brain, but it is the creative force for neurotransmitters to feed your brain, to keep your nervous system calm. So I like a lot of neurological issues, not just brain fog, but a lot of hyperactive, hypersensitive, a lot of these different digestive oriented issues, even for my, kid clients that I've treated in the past who've had autism and different neurological symptoms, that actually one of the roots was their digestive tract was so filled with parasites that they couldn't ever regulate their nervous system because their immune system was haywire, and then their brain never had enough neurotransmitters produced to keep them calm. But I mean, there's things like sleep disruption. They're alive at night. So when you go to sleep, they come alive at night. It's so creepy to think that. But if you've ever had a kid with pinworms, when they're not typically bothered during the day, but when they lay down at night, those pinworms come alive. They tend to feed in the body at night when our immune cells and our bodies are at a rest. They are opportunistic. That's their feeding time. That's also why the full moon and different chronobiology type things affects our bodies and affects how they react. But I would say, big time digestive issues. So constipation, the opposite, diarrhea. And, you could go into like, a lot of my clients, they don't poop for 2 to like 5 days and they think it's normal. And we run a parasite panel or we do muscle testing, and they have a ropeworm in their digestive system blocking their digestive tract. So literally fecal matter can't come out correctly because there's a ropeworm sitting in there blocking their digestive system. And
Mm.
so malnutrition is a huge one too, because if you have it present and you're eating expensive foods and superfoods and taking supplements and things, most people are underweight. They can't gain weight. So I see a lot of clients who are extremely skinny, extremely fatigued in that way, and parasites rob the body of the ability to produce mitochondria. So a lot of like chronic fatigue clients, the root issue is parasites. They're robbing the body's ability to utilize nutrition at a cellular level to produce energy. It never makes it to the cell. It's making it to them. And then a huge one I see is allergies. So in manifestations on the skin, manifestations in their nose, a lot of the food sensitivity panels that I ran back in the day, where we're trying to eliminate foods, the food wasn't the factor causing the allergy. It was actually the parasite reacting to the food that you were eating. And when it spit out ammonia toxins from its waste, you would have an autoimmune reaction to whatever you ate. And people who were parasite laden, their immune markers were all over the place because their body could never self-regulate. So the symptoms are so vast and they're affecting so many different parts of the body.
Sounds like a horror movie, doesn't it?
It really, I know, it really does.
At night they come out.
Oh, I know. It's like, it's like a zombie novel, it's pretty
That's
wild.
right.
Yeah.
I wanted to also ask, you touched on the full moon there. So like a lot of people think, is it true or is it a myth that the, activity is more of the parasites is more active during the full moon?
Yeah, so I like to talk about, they call it chronobiology. So literally for everybody out there, your body is tuned to the regulation of sun and moon cycles. So your organ systems go on detoxification patterns and pathways every single day and night. And we are literally created for our bodies to be regulated by the sun and the moon. So it's foundational for that understanding. And I think women are a little bit more in tune in this than men are, because you guys actually react more hormonally during a full moon cycle because there's shifts in melatonin and progesterone. And you guys tend to be more sensitive to those fluctuations, even though men are still being affected by it. So the opportunistic ability when you're going through fluctuations from the full moon, parasites have that sense to affect your body because when you're in a dysregulated state, that's time for them to feed more. That's time for them to disrupt more. And it's not a myth. And I tell all of my clients, you are killing yourself by staying up late. If you can't go to bed early, when the sun goes down is when we used to go to sleep. And we create artificial light to keep us forcing ourselves awake. And we don't produce hormones. We don't detoxify our organs correctly. We do not reset our immune system. And it is integral that if you listen to this podcast and you want to start parasite cleansing, that there are things you do before you even start to get your body in line with how the sun and the moon are regulating your body and your organ systems. So go to bed early, wake up when the sun comes up. And we're such a opposite of nature community that we've actually got to find ways to make sacrifices of decisions that have become our norm in order to clear a clear path for us to be healed. When I started my healing journey, I was on a graveyard shift, and that Dr. Gonino and Dr. Gillet, they said, hey, Michael, if you want to kill yourself faster, stay on that shift, because all my cells were stressed out. I was literally forcing the biology of my body to go backwards. And it's so detrimental to our bodies. And so basically what you're doing inside that reality is you're making a terrain easier for parasites to thrive. So that's it's such a not a myth when you understand our biology is regulated by it. and not just the tides are pulled, but we are saltwater beings. We go through pulls and changes because we're made of the earth itself. If we go on like a higher alchemical level, if the earth and gravity and changes pull, we're inside that pull of energy.
I sometimes feel like we were so much wiser before the invention of all these things that we have these days. We already knew, we're already
So
in tune with all of these things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we class it as myths and push it to the side where
We're just so
there's
out
real
of touch
vigility.
now.
Out of touch. Yeah.
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 It's so true. We used to be like little ancient Yodas walking around, and we used to like, it was natural to have our feet touching the earth. It was natural for us to go and like draw water. It was natural for us to always be moving until the end of the night. We gathered, we hunted, we made what we used. All of those things are so lost, so far gone.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that for every generation that goes away from it, epigenetically, we get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker down the line. And so it's got to stop. Like the information we provide is stopping an epigenetic nightmare, and parasites is one huge component to it. And I'm sure in the future we can go into many other components, but it's definitely one that's holding back a lot of people, and especially a lot of kids. I'm telling you, misbehaving kids who can't tell you what's wrong with them, 9 times out of 10 are dealing with severe digestive issues.
Mm.
And it's interesting because our stomach is the seat of emotion. So we have a gut feeling for a reason. And so imagine how much clarity you can have prospectively. If your digestive system's clear, you're going to feel more.
Yeah.
I'm
So
getting
true.
kind of meta and spiritual.
I know, I love it. I love it.
Gotcha. I hope you don't mind.
I'm digging it. I'm digging
connected.
it.
Okay, cool.
Well, Leah's the yogi, so she's all in.
Okay, so you know.
Yeah. I would love to stay and talk about it. Maybe we can do a whole nother podcast, but I will hand over to Holly because she's got lots of burning questions she wants to ask you. So
I do. I'm over here taking notes because I have so many. But first, I just have a question. So, you talked about grounding, walking barefoot on the earth, but isn't that also a way that we can get parasites? Because now I'm sitting here thinking, because now every morning, like I have some acreage now, I go walk barefoot every morning. And now I'm sitting here thinking, am I just out collecting parasites as I'm walking through my fields?
Unfortunately, the answer would be yes.
Okay, nice.
There is a give and take with that. So I've actually switched how I deal with that reality. So I have grounding mats on my bed. I have a grounding mat on my desk when I'm working. I have the ability, the third prong in your house is a copper wired that rod. It's all attached to the same rod that goes directly into the earth. When you put these silver lined sheets or pads and you put your body on it, it's the same grounding sensation that you would have by going out into the earth. So I would say this, until you've gone through a parasite cleanse and until you shift your terrain, I would stop going outside barefoot. I would get some of those products. When you make the switch, you're going to create a body that they can't attach into. And so when you go walk in barefoot again, even if you contracted it, it will not be able to live in this new terrain. So I would say that would be the step that I would give you, Holly. I would make that switch and then let us go through a cleanse. And then once you're good, go back out in nature and jump in the ocean, put your feet in the sand and do all the fun stuff barefoot.
Okay. I'm mid cleanse, so I'll put shoes on my feet.
Okay, cool.
Come back to that. But using grounding mats, like, isn't that just like another way? Like, aren't you just like MacGyvering nature there? Like we talk about being separated from nature, and then here we are using prongs and mats.
I know, but it's also, I think that some of man's ingenuity, I mean, even the supplement cleansing is taking nature and placating it up to a high level so that we actually have the ability internally to shift, because we're not outside eating wild herbs and foraging for these different things. So there is a shift, there's a balance there. And I think that if we stay in balance and we do things intelligently, then we're just paving the path of clarity for our bodies. And I'm a fan of medical device technology. I love saunas. I love, grounding. I love zappers. I've used medical healing devices. I'm surrounded by them at my desk. I have tuning forks. I have neuro-optical glasses that flash in your eyes and help your brain. I have so much stuff. I have Theracanes. I have foam rollers. I'm like, my apartment is like a healing mecca, because I feel like we need those things, because we are in a reality where this is our reality. We're connecting virtually. We're sitting in desks. We are having to basically keep the attunement of our bodies and align with nature with tools that help us get into it, because we can't just go frolic naked in nature every day and run around and touch trees all the time. Like it's not a reality, at least for me. Sometimes I get to break away and like go to the beach or go out in nature, and it's awesome. But for the majority of my life, I'm trying to bring nature into my life, plants in my house. I'm trying to surround myself. So just be in balance with that. That's what I would say.
That makes sense. Until we can all be on David Wolf's farm, we'll have to improvise.
It's eating cacao and, chanting with each other. And we'll be there one day.
Summer vacay. Okay. I have another question though. I want to get to this other article, but I do want to circle back. So you talked about how parasites are often the root cause of a lot of common ailments, including autoimmune diseases and allergies and brain fog and just all the things that are very common with people suffering. So when they come to a practitioner, and we have all sorts of tools in our toolbox to assess these things, and I know Leah and I, our big thing is always starting with digestion and the gut, is that and we do see success there, but are you suggesting that maybe there should be a shift in the practitioner realm where we are addressing parasites first and foundationally?
Yes. Yeah. I think there should definitely be a shift. So I like Cellcore's principles, and I'll get into Cellcore principle because I think it's extremely powerful prospectively for practitioners to follow. So they built a roadmap to health. That's what they call it. And it's a 5-phased approach. And every phase goes comprehensively through either an organ system of the body, a toxin perspective, and they tier it out long enough to make it effective. So when I started back in the day, I would take different digestive cleanses and different things. They'd be like a 3-day, and you would be drinking psyllium fiber and fasting and taking wormwood, and I'd be like pooping out ropey material and, like dying on the toilet every single day. And I just felt terrible because a lot of practitioners I were dealing with were starting at parasites, and I actually wasn't prepped enough to handle the cleanse. So for Cellcore's roadmap to health, the first phase that everyone should start with is energy and drainage. You have to be able to pour enough energy into your cell to produce intracellular stability of your immune cells to handle die-off and cleansing of something as serious as a parasite infection. So phase 1 is energy and drainage. They make sure your liver, your kidneys, your gallbladder, your bile production, a lot of digestive components, but also the filtration system and the energy of the cell are strong enough to handle phase 2. And 2 is where they go after parasites. So for everybody in a cleansing perspective or practitioners listening, I would suggest you check out that roadmap to health, because I notice a lot of clients are so energy deficient. Their drainage pathways are so plugged. Here is a quick drainage pathway test that takes anybody can test yourself. If you go to the bathroom and you have to wipe a lot, like you go number 2 and you wipe and wipe and wipe and wipe and wipe, the fats and oils that are meant to be emulsified through the gallbladder and bile that are synthesized in the liver that create healthy hormones, if that system is off, you are going to have undigested fats and oils coming through your bowels. That is a clear sign that your energy and drainage pathways aren't opened up. So what's a good sign that they are? You have something that I call ghost poops. So if you go through energy and drainage enough, you'll start having ghost poops. It'll just be one long goodness. You won't have to wipe 700 times like you have a dry erase marker coming out your biscuits. Like it should just, everything should be, so that phase one approach is super important. Two goes into the digestive cleansing and parasite cleansing. And you have to imagine that if you're taking parasite cleansing at a full body approach, you could be talking about liver flukes in the liver. You could be talking about rope and tapeworms in the small and large intestine. You could have strongyloides, these little tiny worms in your sinus cavities. There could be so many different ones all over the body. So comprehensively, if your immune system is not ready to handle that cascade, it can become very, very herxing. Like you can have a over cleanse effect and wind up getting yourself sick. And that's why there is this phase that they created. So once you clean up phase two, they want to clean up the environment. So parasites thrive where there's heavy metals, pesticides, acid, acidic rainwater, plastics, you name it, because when you're shifting those toxic things around, you are internally terraining yourself to be a sick person, but to also host organisms, and not just parasites, but a lot of bacteria act like parasites, viruses act like parasites. They're hosting off your cells, they're hosting off your body, they're running infections, and their attempt is to recycle you. They want to kill you, basically. And they're meant in nature, they're like recyclers. They break things down, and they help clean things up. But unfortunately, in our bodies, they're breaking down our bodies themselves. So in three, they reset the immune system. They go after toxins that would keep the terrain. They clean up the terrain. So it's like an immune system reset. In phase four, they clean the lymphatic system up, and they go heavy after heavy metals and volatile organic compounds. So, plastics and VOCs and all the chemical slew of things we've been digesting or putting on our skin for our entire life. And the fifth phase is Lyme disease. So they go after Lyme. And the reason why they created that is for practitioners to be educated that don't skip around. A lot of practitioners skip around, and that's not necessarily an intelligent way to treat a client or a patient. So hopefully that gave you a little perspective, and I can give y'all a roadmap to health kind of infographic that you can provide listeners.
I love that. Yeah.
To give them education for visual. Yeah.
And I think this is really important. I'm glad you went over it this way for our listeners who aren't practitioners, and you're just out there, and we hear about things all the time, especially like around holidays, going into summer, New Year's, about doing a cleanse or doing a detox. And there's all sorts of people running programs out there doing these things. But if you don't understand the foundational aspects of how cleansing works and how detoxification works, and you aren't doing that work of opening up your detoxification pathways and your drainage pathways first, then you're just setting yourself up to create more illness or to stir things up in your body that's just going to circle around in there. So to anyone listening, I want that to be a red flag to you if you're going to be working with someone and they aren't addressing drainage pathways and your detox pathways firsthand. So I think that's a good takeaway for our audience there. We have just a few more minutes left, but I really want to get to this last article. And, because I think it's so relevant right now, there's a lot of questions going around, and I think that you'll do an excellent job explaining this because you've done such a great job so far.
Thank you.
But there is an article out right now, and this is just one of hundreds that are circling around talking about well, I'll just name the name of this article is called Efforts Grow to End Use of Potentially Harmful Parasite Drug. And the summary of the article for our listeners is that talking about how health experts and medical groups are trying to stop the use of this decades-old parasite drug, specifically ivermectin in this discussion here, and its treatment and use for treating COVID-19. And I normally try to stay away from this topic, and we're not a political podcast, so we're not going to go there. But it's saying how ivermectin's being promoted by all these like right-wing or conservative people, but other countries are using it. I personally know dozens of people who have had success there, using ivermectin specifically to treat COVID-19. And I'm not giving medical advice, I'm not doing anything, but I have a burning question that I think nobody's asking, and it's blowing my mind that nobody's asking this question. But why would an anti-parasitic drug be effective in treating something that's a virus? And what is that relationship, that relational pathways that parasites have with viruses and bacterias and other opportunistic hindrances to us health-wise? I know that's a big question.
It's a big question. I love that question. It's my favorite question on the freaking planet for a long time in the kind of back world of conspiracy theory. Because if you talk about this by default, whether it doesn't matter what you believe or don't believe, people will just discredit you. Like, they're a conspiracy theorist, get our. But we were all chatting on the back end saying, is COVID-19 a parasite? Have they actually synthesized the virus? And if every country on the planet is issuing an anti-parasitical drug and seeing their numbers drop dramatically with no jab needed in their countries, then the question becomes, the article where they said they synthesized it, meaning like it's actual a thing. This is my theory on it, because I can't prove either way. I don't have a lab set up in my apartment to pull someone's blood and find all this stuff out. It goes back to what we're talking about, terrain. We take a entire community of people who have been thriving together. They've been touching each other. They've been interacting. They've been in the community, in the world. You put fear, which suppresses your immune system and causes all of our bodies to have an opportunistic ability to catch infections. So at the very bare minimum, when you announce something to instill fear in people, their bodies shift, right? So, okay, so we have this massive shift with fear. Then you start isolation. There are so many studies I can show you that when you're outside of community, one of my favorite doctors, James Maskell, wrote a book called The Community Cure. And he showed that people in communities who had physical touch, who were surrounded, they had hugs, they were talking, eye contact, they had 70 to 80% higher immune markers, meaning their immune system was so much higher, because we are built to be around one another. We are not built to live in a box, to go sit in a box, to get back to our box, to stare at boxes, to never ever connect with each other. So here's the deal. You sprinkle on the fear, you sprinkle in the isolation. We're in indoor homes where air quality is terrible. We're all breathing in toxins at rates that we've never existed before. We are now consuming, electronics. We're not exercising. We're not going anywhere. We're staying stagnant. Stagnation breeds sickness. All of these things are a recipe for, guess what, to thrive? Parasites to thrive. Parasites to thrive. And here's the reality. A lot of bacteria, they act like parasites. Gram-negative bacteria like H. pylori, viruses, they act like parasites. They come in, host off your body. They manifest when your immune system is weak. And I've been in this for a long time. The reason why ivermectin is so powerful is because parasites as a main infection in the body that cause chronic immune weakness, when you take that away, your immune system can handle pretty much anything. This is why parasite cleansing should be at the foundation of a healing protocol, because everything from cancer to heart disease, there is a byproduct of inflammation that's being created from parasite infections, that a lot of people who went into the hospital with this supposed infection that we're talking about, they were dealing with inflammation. They were dealing with secondary issues.
Mm-hmm.
They already had a bodily terrain that was preset up for death from inflammation. So it's more important than ever to exercise. It's more important than ever to parasite cleanse. It's more important than ever to Consider your body as a whole, because if you are healthy and strong, you have a better chance of surviving anything that's a supposed outbreak. And the reason why it's going to keep your immune system strong. This is why a lot of people who turned off the news and stopped watching fear and had faith that everything was going to be okay, guess what? It shifts their immune system. So the people who believed, you could even take Bruce Lipton's research of the biology of belief. If you gave me ivermectin and I felt like I had COVID and I took ivermectin, just the belief that ivermectin would heal COVID is going to shift my body's terrain. So I think a lot of that collectively, when that starts to happen, they've got to shift the narrative, because that breaks you out of fear. If you had the answer, you're not going to be afraid anymore. And unfortunately, the reason why we're doing this podcast is we do not want to see the sick care system thrive. We want to provide true healthcare, true bodily freedom for people, that they're empowered with this knowledge to make healthy decisions that create a whole healthy body. I would not want someone who's overweight with heart disease and diabetes that they just go out and take ivermectin without thinking about their entire body. I want you to think about your whole body. I want you to think about how much water you drink and your nutrition and your exercise. And it feels like a lot, but layer by layer, we can all change. And layer by layer, we can all get better. So in the short term, if you think you have COVID or you're from the pandy, I'm like you. I have seen so many people get 100% better, including Joe Rogan and all these people who, stand up and they're on their podcast platform saying the same thing, because even for someone healthy like him, it creates an environment for his immune system to get on top of any infection. It doesn't matter how healthy you even perceptively are. It's one of many things that can help out. So,
Yeah.
And go for it, Holly.
Oh, I was just going to say, so it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be that it's ivermectin, this wonder drug, but it's something that is giving the body a chance to thrive, because it's addressing the underlying systemic issue of the fact that most everybody has a parasite. And if you can treat that, you can give the body and the immune system a chance, a fighting chance to take on whatever comes its way, no matter what it is. The underlying thing is we need to address parasites. And it's not this wonder drug and it's not this killer virus, it's the collective of it all in a holistic lens.
100%. That's beautifully said. And that's why our job is more important now than ever, because education is at the forefront of people are searching us out right now. They are questioning every narrative you could ever imagine. Our ability to reach people is at the highest levels possible, because there's such a shift in mistrust, because the people who want to keep the narratives alive can't do it correctly, because our collective voice is louder than theirs. So,
yeah.
it's we're on the blessing side, we're on the light side, we're on the side that's winning, because what they're intending for, evil, it's being turned around for good, and it's rising up more voices, and it's creating a louder narrative that if they're gonna push harder, we're gonna push harder in education.
Yeah,
That's
I definitely agree. And that's all across the board there. You mentioned seeking out practitioners. Where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I am the Holistic Connector. So if you guys want to hit me up there, you can shoot me a DM. You can go to my link tree. I do, consultations virtually. I do in-person muscle testing. If you're in Dallas, Texas, or the surrounding areas, I'll come to you, or you can come to me. And yeah, I use Instagram as my way of connecting with everybody. And
okay. And you're also doing a new project now or something, actually connecting practitioners, right? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I had the opportunity, I met this incredible practitioner named Dr. Isaac Jones. He created a company called Health Experts Alliance. He is the one who, through a 8-year long stint of building a mastermind program and virtual accelerator platform has built the platform of people like Dr. Axe, Dr. Jockers. And actually, when I worked for Cellcore, he was the one who built the platform for them to have virtual practices of my top practitioners. So now I, outside of seeing clients, actually see practitioners virtually, and I help them through our virtual practice accelerator platform build a virtual practice from an infrastructure of a system that they can scale and grow, work less, but make more, learn how to create passive income streams, learn how to market themselves, learn what their niches should be. And really, if you have a brick and mortar, or you have a virtual space, or you have a little bit of both, even foundationally, to go back with a high performance coaching, product and also team of people around you to create, this new business way of thinking. I am beyond blessed because I'm an entrepreneur. I eat, sleep, and breathe entrepreneurship. And now I get to tune in with practitioners who want to impact more people's lives. And the way that we're doing it now, and thank you, COVID, is virtually. There has been a massive shift of having clients come into our space this way. And so if you're interested in that, you can do the same thing. Just DM me and reach out to me, and I'll send you a link, and we can, if you're a practitioner, we'll book a strategy call, and I'll ask you a bunch of questions about your business and see if we're a fit to be able to help you. And I've just seen people just completely thrive. All their goals are being hit in a short amount of time. And it's been a blessing and a refreshing thing for me because I love empowering practitioners. It's my favorite thing on the planet to do. I get to grow and help support the community that helped get me healed. That's going to be my motto for the rest of my life. That's my mission in life. That's what God placed me here to do. So
that's so amazing. And I'm so glad you shared that, because we do have a lot of practitioners who listen, and especially a lot of NTA graduates,
awesome.
like Leah and I, who are building their practice. So I'm glad that we can offer you as a resource for that too. This has been an awesome conversation. I wish this show was 3 hours long because I want to just keep going. Leah, do you have anything to add?
It's just been such a great, been such a great chat. And thank you, Michael, for sharing what you do with the world, with us. Like, it's just, we need to get you out there. Everyone should be listening to you.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that. You guys are a blessing. Both of y'all are lights, and I just love y'all's vibe and energy. And I'm so uplifted by this. You guys are just so cool and just allow me to vibe. And so thank you for having me on. And I hope you guys are extremely blessed with your families and everything that y'all do. So
thank you. That's so sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is the end of today's episode. Our theme music is created by Andrew Bowden, and production services are by Kevin Kennedy Spain of Disc of Light Media. Have a great week, everyone.